Good afternoon. I'm Councilmember Jose Huizar. This will be a committee of one today. We have, this is a Public Works Committee. I'm going to have items 2, 3, and 5 on consent. And we'll send those to council as a recommendation from chair. And we have before us item number 1, 4, and that's it. Item 1 and 4. We have a speaker card on number 4. That's why we are not doing that one on consent. Otherwise, it'd be consent. Okay.
Oh, Julia Moy, Bureau of Engineering. The speaker card, it was in case any opposition was in attendance, and I believe we just have someone in support of the proposal, so they're happy to let that go on consent.
Put that on consent. Okay, thank you. I always advise stop while you're ahead, so. Good. So we'll just take up item number, what's left, clerk?
We have items number 1 and 6 for discussion only.
Okay, we'll take those up for discussion. Okay, so item number 1.
Item number 1 is a discussion relative to the comments on the controller's performance and financial audit of the Department of Public Works and Transportation American Recovery and Reinvestment Act grants.
Okay, staff here to present this item? No staff here to present this item?
Are you looking for controller?
Yes, controller, yep, okay. Controller's office is here, welcome.
Thank you. Cynthia Varela with the Controller's Office. Would you like me to give you just a briefing of
Yes, but
the issues?
just a brief summary of your findings.
Okay. As a way of introducing both reports, we just wanted to make sure that some of these notable issues are considered. The primary issue that the Controller's reports are emphasizing is the expediency of contract awards. Since the intent of ERA is to stimulate the economy and is not met if contracts are not awarded quickly to enable quick project starts and spending of ERA funds. The audit's focused on a specific point in time, several months after the grants included in our audit period were awarded. And since these awards are on a cost reimbursement basis, it means that only a portion of the grant funds had been expended, billed for reimbursement, and received. I think it's important to note that at the specific point in time that we looked at both the Department of Transportation and the Department of Public Works, both departments had expended less than 10% of the total funding that they had been awarded. As required by the OMB, the methodology for calculating the number of jobs created and retained is intended to report FTEs that were paid with ERA funds for a specific point in time, a snapshot, if you will, and represents a conversion of hours worked to FTEs to equate to a single job. These reports were also just the activities of 2 departments that have received ERA awards and aren't necessarily reflective of citywide results, nor the current impact on jobs created or retained with ERA funding received by the city. So with the DOT audit report, what we found was that the processes that they had in place to ensure compliance with ERA requirements and funded programs and projects were implemented efficiently and will result in the intended outcomes. We were looking to confirm that. As of our audit period, they'd been awarded 7 ERA grants, 6 through the Federal Highway Administration and 1 through the Federal Transit Administration for a total of $40.8 million. The ERA grants were to fund a variety of transportation-related activities, such as the installation of left-turn arrows, LED traffic signals, as well as new traffic signals, enhancing the transit priority system, and improving highway rail grade crossing systems and surfaces. Overall, we found that the department is familiar with federal funding requirements and has established processes for contracting, project management, and accounting. Although ERA requirements are similar in some respects to other federal grant programs, there are some additional requirements mandated by the Recovery Act. In that regard, DOT has processes in place to ensure that ERA funds are recorded and expenditures tracked for reimbursement, and that the progress of the project is monitored through completion. Further, there are controls to ensure that ERA funds are expended in compliance with the Recovery Act, and required data is tracked and reported to the appropriate grantor agency. But we did note some areas that could be improved. In the first example, the contracting processes followed by DOT may not be sufficiently streamlined to ensure that ERA funds are expended quickly to promote job creation and retention and stimulate the economy. For example, we noted 4 out of the 6 Federal Highway Administration projects were not sent for bid proposals, until at least 7 months after the notice to proceed from the state and the Federal Highway Administration was received. Construction is estimated to start about 12 months after the projects were approved to proceed and the city accepted the funding. Number 2, the process to report accurate job estimates timely may not be adequate. For example, the jobs data was initially based on budgeted positions, not actual hours worked, and reporting deadlines were missed for some projects in November 2009 and March 2010. The processes for transparent and accurate tracking of ERA expenditures need strengthening. We found that the project manager does not review expenditure information to ensure that all costs are billed. We noted that some material costs were not billed because DOT did not have the supporting documents from GSD, and we noted that some meal costs were not billed for reimbursement. We also noted that ERA-numbered work orders were established by DOT, but field employees continued to use non-ERA work orders. As a result, those labor costs charged to the non-ERA work orders were not captured for billings. Current processes to ensure that the general fund is reimbursed timely for front funding. Current processes do not ensure the general fund is reimbursed timely for front funding or ensure that MICLA cash flow reports are submitted timely to the CAO. About $1 million in direct labor and material costs were reimbursed by Caltrans prior to January 2010 and deposited to the MICLA fund but not transferred to the general fund. We found that the general fund transfer should be made monthly, but because of staffing shortages, the CAO has indicated that bi-monthly transfers are acceptable. Departments are required to submit MICLA cash flow reports to the CAO on a bi-monthly basis, and the CAO relies on this information to estimate the amount of MICLA commercial paper that may need to be issued. As of our field work, DOT had not submitted any MICLA cash flow reports. And then an issue that was similar in both DOT and Public Works is that at the time of approving grant applications, decision makers may not be aware of projects' full costs, the direct and indirect costs, and that billing for indirect costs may not be recovered through the ERA grant. What we found is that typically the indirect costs are claimed on the last billing when the cap rate is approved, and only if there are remaining funds available. For DOT, the ERA projects were part of a citywide allocation for ERA-funded transportation projects. In the CAO's July 2009 report to the mayor and council, it indicated that direct costs and fringe benefits would be reimbursed to the city, and grants would maximize the reimbursement of indirect costs to the extent possible, but that there would be no impact to the city's general fund. We found that there was no formal report detailing all of the city's costs that would be incurred. Are there any questions on DOT? Okay.
Yeah, well, that was generally what some of the findings from the controller, is it indicative of general procedures within Public Works that have to be corrected, or is it just particular to the ERA funding? I mean, it sounds like some of the findings in this report, it's not so much that it was these funds in particular, maybe the accounting and the operational procedures of Public Works that are problematic overall and just need some correction.
I think there are specific things that have to be complied with ERA, and as you know, there's one of the primary focuses of ERA is the job creation and retention. So it's important that we have accurate numbers, they're reported timely. So the deadlines, although we're not a prime recipient in reporting, in most cases, we're not a prime recipient in reporting directly to OMB, we need to meet the deadlines that are reporting to the state. So those things where we're reporting information, we need to make sure that we're meeting those deadlines so that the prime recipient can then report correctly to OMB. As far as the contracting, where we're looking at the expediency of the contract awards, the way that the controller's office is looking at it is, for ERA, it's kind of a new game plan, if you will. maybe what is acceptable under normal circumstances, given the expectation that these things are going to happen fairly quickly. We may need to look at different ways of doing the normal contracting process and trying to find ways to expedite that. I think the good example is council taking the action that they created the ad hoc committee to approve grant applications and awards, and that kind of was an expedited process than what the city normally follows when we get grant awards. So I think that was recognized at that level, that ERA required a different way of doing business. And so we're looking for those things for the rest of the processes.
Now, were there any new numbers after your report was submitted? Did you receive any new numbers from the departments?
We haven't been asking for new numbers, but the CAO at the AGE meeting prepared a report with updated numbers for reimbursements, expenditures, and FTEs through June 30th of 2010. The AGE has asked the controller then to look at those numbers and then report on it, which we'll be doing in a report back. So we're looking at those numbers to confirm the accuracy of that.
Okay. Is there anybody here from the departments, from Public Works? Anybody else? No. Okay, we'll continue this item. I'm sorry, we'll have to listen to you again next time, and no, we won't have your presentation, but I'll ask that the relevant departments from Public Works come up and respond to these findings.
Well, that was DOT. Do you want to know? I didn't brief you on Public Works, so it's up to you.
I want to do
if you
Public
need-
Works. Yeah. Public Works?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Ron Olive, Assistant Director of Street Services. We do have representatives from the four affected bureaus, but no one to speak as an umbrella for Public Works, if you will.
Okay.
So we can respond one at a time, maybe,
Yeah.
if that's okay with the committee. So I guess in general, just as an update, all of the issues we believe that were raised in the Controller's report, again, for street services, we feel have already been resolved or are of, excuse the term, little consequence. I think we've gotten past that. So I just want to give you an update. We've calculated the jobs created based on the federal guidelines, and just for street services, we have over 60 jobs created, and we're estimating about another 25% for especially all of our resurfacing work that we need support from Bureau of Engineering for survey, DOT for striping, and general services for fleet maintenance and materials testing. So I think comfortably for the $52.9 million we were awarded, we're looking at about 70 to 75 jobs created.
Is that accurate?
I can only report on what we looked at, which was past practice. And I think the other thing is that probably needs to be understood, and I tried to do that in the initial comments, is that the awards are different than what they've received. This is a cost reimbursement. So despite having received, and I don't know if you've received or just been awarded $59 million, those are awards, not really reimbursements.
Out of the $53 million, and again, we're a little bit unique. All of the work we're doing is through City Force's force account, if you will. We're not contracting any work.
Or were those just jobs retained and not cut?
Well, actually, the budget cycle that started July 1st of 2009, there were a number of programs, jobs eliminated in that budget, and we transitioned those employees into this program. The biggest one probably in the sidewalk repair program. 41 people we moved over into these jobs.
So but you count them as job creators?
Yes. They were eliminated and then new positions created for these folks. But to date, we've expended out of the $53 million, about 45% of the funds, so nearly $24 million. And we've received over $19 million in reimbursements to date, so with a couple billings still pending.
What other departments do you have, or bureaus?
If you don't mind, I'll defer to them to speak on their behalf.
Sure.
Good afternoon, Ted Allen with the Bureau of Engineering. The Bureau of Engineering is the lead for 3 ARA projects in this audit. They're all bridge projects. The 3 projects, 2 of them have been awarded, and the third is out to bid. The Bureau of Engineering is also the office that did the bid and award process for the public works and DOT projects that were bid out. One comment I'd make about the contracting process that's brought up in the audit is it's referring to the time from the grant approval to when the project was awarded to a contractor. But in some of these cases, there were some questions that had to be answered before it was ready to put out to bid. So it's not all the contracting process. I would say, the contracting process itself was only part of that time. But we have been asked to report back through Audits and Governmental Efficiencies Committee to work with the CAO and the CLA to look at that process to see if some of the steps that are not federally required could be waived. But I think we'll find that most all of those are required by federal process. So we don't have very many jobs at this point because most of the work leading up to project award is not eligible under ARA for reimbursement. Now that we've awarded 2 projects, the construction work will begin and the jobs will start increasing on ours. So right now we're only reporting 1 job. It's been city staff working on it in the award process.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other bureau here?
Good afternoon. Neil Guglielmo, Bureau of Sanitation. So the Bureau of Sanitation has made progress. I think some of the issues were raised in the report have been resolved at this point in time. One had to do with the use of the good faith effort process on behalf of the city as opposed to the federal DBE process. And we've worked with the state, so they've accepted our good faith effort process. We've worked close with ConAd. With regards to the bid and award process, as I think was aptly mentioned by my comment from BOE, we followed the guidelines. I think in terms of some of the accounting issues, I think it would be helpful. Some of the points that were raised in the controller's audit with regards to citywide policies, and the development of those policies would be good. So to the extent that the CAO and the controller provide those policies to us or best practices or such, I think all the bureaus would be happy to work within those guidelines. I know that leading up to the ARA, there were meetings with Department of Public Works staff and controller staff on the accounting side as to how these funds would be accounted for. One of the issues raised was on 120% of the grant award, and that's in terms of how we will bill. And I think the intent there is that we want to maximize use of the grant and preserve eligible costs. And it can be very difficult at the end of a grant project when the audits come back from state, federal, OIG, or whomever else, and they take a look and they're looking to see, did you comply with the grant requirements? As part of it. And their part of it is, can they free up additional monies? We've had this happen before, time and time again, with FEMA grant awards. And so we want to preserve eligible costs. Our costs are all eligible in terms of the Prop O fund, that large bond measure approved by voters. So we feel very comfortable. We're not increasing the amount of the cost in the project. These are the costs of the project. So we've kept a very close watch on those costs, tracking on them. And we believe that we're fine there. In terms of the issue of the jobs reporting, we've followed the instructions we received so far. We've reported that information to the CAO's office. I'm probably not the best expert in terms of how to calculate the number of jobs. I'll defer that to others. But I would say if there's an issue with that, perhaps the controller and CAO can talk. That's all I have. I think there were some other points raised. One had to do with the Caltrans Local Assistance Procedures Manual, which is followed for transportation projects. We don't have the same kinds of guidelines from the State Water Resources Control Board, which was the funding source for 2 of our other projects, a irrigation project for Mar Vista and a low-flow diversion project. And so we are contacting the State Water Resources Control Board to see if they have or if they could develop a similar procedures manual for those types of projects, which would be applicable statewide. It's not really the onus on the city to develop a procedures manual for a state agency, but we'd be happy to work with them, and we think that would be very good, because then any grants we receive in the future from that grantor, again, we always follow the grant requirements, but it'd be good to have a procedures manual. I think the controller hit that one on perfect. I think we agree with them 100% on that one. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, this is a simply a report. We'll note and file it for this committee.
This is for discussion purposes.
That's for discussion purposes only. So, thank you very much. Thank you, and I think our audits committee will. They have a number of outstanding questions. They've continued the item in their committee. We'll follow through for this discussion in the audits committee. Next item.
Item number 6 is a Bureau of Engineering and City Attorney's status report relative to the revised ordinance pertaining to the sidewalk dining inspection program.
Thank you. Now, what's this doing back in here? I thought this was out of our committee already. What happened? How's it this back here? Can we get this out of our committee?
I can give you a status that might
Yeah, give me a
explain where
status.
we are.
Yeah, let me know where we're at.
This has gone through your committee before. In fact, back in '08, we submitted an ordinance for the outdoor dining that created a biannual, every 2 years, administrative and inspection fee. In the process of,
Okay, hold on just a second.
oh, certainly.
It's the owls in here then. Yeah. What was that? Okay, good. Go ahead.
I don't know.
Yeah.
During the council process, culminating in 2010 May, council directed us, the city attorney's office, to revise that draft ordinance to not have the administrative and inspection fee, which is every 2 years, but instead to have a penalty fee. So we're in the process of taking that draft ordinance that we submitted in '08 and revising it to take out the administrative and inspection fee, which would have been something that they would pay every 2 years, and put in its place a penalty fee, so that in the event there's a complaint, an inspector goes out and finds that any of the revocable permit conditions have not been met, then the city has a penalty.
That's right. And this was,
It's an escalating level of penalty that would increase to the point where the revocable permit would be revoked.
I think Ms. Han had concern with this, right?
Excuse me?
Ms. Han had concern with this in council. So that's why we brought it back to committee. So now you revised the ordinance to include that language.
We're in the process of doing that, so we'll bring the revised ordinance back to council. As to what committees it will go through,
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that.
Did you do that already in this ordinance? No?
The current draft ordinance that we have didn't have that penalty
Okay.
provision. That's what we're putting into the ordinance now.
So should we continue this in here until we get that, or should we move this back to council and have it ready by council?
Just send it to council.
It's up to you, really. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been here before, but it's going to be a different.
But how long?
But council has already acted and directed us to put that penalty provision in the ordinance.
Okay, so it's already,
Yeah, this can go directly back to the
Yeah.
council.
all right, let's get it back to council then.
Okay, will
And
do.
and how long would that take?
We'll try to get it done within a month's time.
Okay.
We have a number of ordinances that we're working on.
Sounds good.
Okay?
We'll get this back to council. Thank you very much.
Make sure you like,
Next item,
and if you don't, bring it back.
no public comment? Thank you. That's it. Meeting adjourned.